it behind you, but just to say that this passage is very stark, isn't it? There's good, there's bad, there's heaven, there's hell, there's the rich man, there's the poor man. And then I think one of the most terrifying parts of the passage to me is the business about the chasm being fixed. There's good, there's bad, there's the rich, there's the poor, and the chasm fixed. There's no way to go back in between. And notice in this passage, however, that the rich man's sin is not from being rich. It's because he's blind, he's indifferent. There's Lazarus sitting at his gate day after day, and he pays no attention to him. And even in the afterlife, expects him to come and serve him. So we know how wealth and privilege can do that to us. So at the start of this ministry 25 years ago, we asked the question, who are the neighbors at our door? Who are the ones that we're not seeing or walking past? And how can we be a presence to them? How can we support and help them? And so that's how it started. I told the story before. When I first came to St. Paul's, we were inundated with neighbors coming to our door for help. So much so that I felt like I really wasn't making a bit of difference. I might have been shelling out some cash for short-term crisis events, but it wasn't changing people's lives. It wasn't doing anything substantive. And I thought, there must be a better way. There has to be a better way. At the very least, to take the time to be able to hear people's stories and to help them in meaningful, substantive ways. And you're going to hear 25 years of development that has evolved in ways that I could not have begun to imagine way back then. So with that, I'm going to pass the microphone to Stacy Carlson Kelly, who began her life among us as a Christian disciple in baptism, but as a Lazarus volunteer.
Good morning. Yes, so it's evolved over the years, and as I've been at St. Paul's and grown up in St. Paul's, I've seen some of the changes. But so many years ago, on Tuesday mornings, we would open the doors here, and it would be here in Norton at about, I think we started at 9 o'clock, and people would start to line up outside because it was first come, first served. And they would come in, and we'd have a clipboard, and we'd get their name. And there were some of the same volunteers. Betty was here, and so they'd come in and they'd wait, and we would be all crammed in that little office there, and there'd be Dorothy, at the time it was Dorothy Pearson that I started working with, and we'd talk to people and ask what they wanted, and it would be the same sort of thing, one-on-one counseling, and people would come in with all kinds of requests. These days it's much more rent, as June and the team will talk about, but then it was anything from food, utilities, and for me, like having lived a fairly comfortable life, I didn't realize that as a parent, if they shut off your utilities, you're in danger of losing your children. And so all of a sudden when I heard that, I'm like, oh my gosh, we got to get your utilities back on. And it was always a team effort, and then at some point we would run out of money, whatever allotment we had for that day, and we'd have to say, sorry, we can't help you. You could go to Christ Church, I think, on Thursdays and try again. And it was a community feel because everybody was in here together, and it's different now, it has to be, but at that time, that was what it was. And I learned a lot. Like I used to go home and put salmon oil on my dog's food because she was old and her hips were bad. And at the same time, I was giving canned food out to, it was really hard, but it was in that way a searing and wonderful experience, maturing experience for me about what the indifference that I didn't even know that I had. So I'm grateful for my time learning from Lazarus and the people of Lazarus. And thank you.
And technically challenged. It's also wonderful because Stacy has now come full circle, and we are working together, collaborating on some things for Lazarus clients. First of all, good morning, and thank you for joining us to talk about Lazarus. I want to first recognize the legacy over these last 25 years by everyone who has worked throughout the years, both, most especially to the former directors, Dorothy Pearson and Laura Simmons, and of course all the volunteers, some of whom are still working with Lazarus. The journey to now was challenged during COVID, But assistance continued by pivoting from seeing clients in person to serving them by phone, over the phone. We gradually returned to seeing clients in person, but we also continued to serve people by phone because there are many people who can't come in person. They either work jobs where if they come to Lazarus, they're not going to be paid, or they have children at home or transportation issues. So we offer both options for people. So we still do have that community that started from the beginning. Sorry. The community that started from the beginning, we still have that feel on Tuesday mornings, and sometimes our phone volunteers will drop in just to have the experience of being part of the community, because we miss seeing them in person. Some of them are here this morning, and you'll meet them. We continue. We answer the calls and work together with a team of committed volunteers and strong community partners. Financial hardship can impact a household with one unexpected crisis. We see single parents, families facing a medical crisis, young professionals who've lost their jobs. So it doesn't discriminate, this crisis situation. We recently have, in the past 2 weeks, we have seen two single fathers, one of whom has a child who was just recently diagnosed with cancer. And unfortunately, he wasn't able to work for periods of time, and so he fell behind. The urgency to keep our neighbors housed is a daily challenge. And we're grateful for all the volunteers and for the partners that help us keep people housed. Once housing is lost, life unravels. There's food insecurity. There's showing up for a job interview trying to look presentable. How do you do that if you're living in your car or you're in a shelter? Mental health issues begin to come up. And it's a downward spiral to recover from and return to normalcy without a home. The lack of stability for children is traumatizing, and being unhoused for Lazarus is not an acceptable outcome. Last Monday was a recent example of Lazarus in action with our partners. We participate with a group of emergency funding partners that are city agencies, other churches, and a couple of nonprofits. An email was delivered at 7 a.m. On the previous, this happened a week ago Monday. An email was delivered at 7 a.m. on the previous Friday from a city agency requesting help with 3 residents who were facing, the sheriff was going to show up on Monday morning. We have a weekly call at 9 a.m. So the call came at 7. At 9 a.m. we have this partners call, and we all just spent most of the call figuring out how we could pledge and or deliver checks. And I'm happy to report that all 3 evictions were canceled. That was a record. We've never had 3 in one day. So we have become very adept at acting together in a very collaborative and supportive way. That outcome could never have happened without that partnership. Lazarus is very fortunate to have the 2 people sitting next to me, Jane Cole and Jack Galvin, who are the 2 lead volunteers for Lazarus, and I'm going to let them talk about what they do and a little bit about how they do it.
All right, I'm going to talk about sort of the process that a client goes through. It starts with a phone call to Lazarus. We only take requests via our emergency, our phone line, where people leave their name and address and describe what they need. And then one of my jobs as a volunteer is to produce a log of those calls. This involves unduplicating, because people call multiple times, looking up each caller in our client files, which are in the Google Cloud, to see if they've been in before. If they've been in as more recently than 4 months ago, I contact them and let them know they're not eligible until those 4 months are up. And the log will contain a target of 30 callers. That's the number that, in a week, that's the number that June estimates our resources and our volunteer staff can support. We usually get 30 callers by the end of Wednesday. So I then go in there, once we have 30, and disable voicemail deposit. People aren't able to leave messages anymore. And then I re-enable it on Monday. But our recorded message says, if you listen to this recording and you can't leave a message, it means we're at capacity for the week. Call back next week. So, and people do that. So we start with a list of 30 callers a week. And then June and some volunteers who aren't here today call back those 30, confirm their eligibility, get complete address and contact information, and then sort the callers into those who still want to come in person on Tuesday and those who want phone calls. Jane handles the in-person people, and I handle the phone call people. So that's the second part of my job, just supporting the volunteers, and I see a couple, 3 of them here today who phone the clients. I send them their assignment and our intake form, which is an electronic form, but I've got a couple of paper copies of it. And you'll see there's like 40 questions on here. But there's skip patterns, and depending on, if you don't work, then you can skip a lot of the questions. And then I wait for the forms to come back and the documents that we require, an ID, a lease, a ledger, a utility bill, depending on what they've requested. Review all that, put it in the client's file, and if it's complete, I send a message to June. I'm sorry, I'll speak into this, who will make a funding decision, notify the volunteer, who then happily calls back the client, and then I put that decision, document that decision in the client's file. Jane's going to talk about the Tuesday volunteers, but let me just give a shout out. So I don't work directly with clients, with people who are requesting help. I'm working with the volunteers. There's about 9 of them who do the phone calls. They're mostly retired. We've got a former consultant, a pastor, a former pastor, 2 teachers, a former school volunteer. I myself am a former economist at the Bureau of Labor Statistics for 37 years. The volunteers manage to get the information and the documentation we need from clients to make a decision on their requests. They've got the empathy and the communication skills and the patience, and it takes a lot of patience with some of these clients. A substantial portion of the clients, as June said, are seniors, they're disabled, or their first language is not English. Somehow, still, the volunteers get what we need. Some even have to coach the clients on using their phones to take photos of the documents required and then sending them in here. A lot of back and forth over that. They also provide information on additional resources the client might want to avail themselves of for food, employment, and legal services. And they advocate for their clients. They tell June the stories that they're hearing when they call and really argue passionately for funding of their clients. I really think that our volunteers are the backbone of the program, and I'm very grateful. I'm very pleased to be able to be the one serving them.
All righty. So in a way, Tuesday morning is the culmination of all this that's gone on. I have the pleasure of arriving at Norton Hall. It's very quiet, although June is in the back setting things up in the office in the Percy Foster Hall room. And we review our clients with our volunteer greeter, Skip Calvert. I wish he was here. Skip gives the heartiest welcome. We can hear it down the hall to everyone that comes. So they are welcomed, and it really sets the tone for what their experience is going to be in this room. It's a friendly place to sit, and they know that someone will listen to their story with compassion. They arrive hoping for some relief. So then our Lazarus volunteers begin arriving, and they are briefed, after lots of hellos and catch-up, they are briefed on the clients they will be speaking with, and then join them in Norton Hall, which is set up here, to introduce themselves and begin a real conversation. And it starts not sitting in back of the computer necessarily or in front of, but they introduce themselves and they begin a conversation. It starts with an exchange of information. It continues with very intentional listening to what these folks are saying to them. Some of our volunteers like to take notes just so that they can remember a few steps further down what that conversation consisted of beyond just filling out the form. The volunteer also will share the information that Jack mentioned. We have handouts that have handouts here. Also, the city has a list of information so that they can get additional resource information, such as workforce development, which has become more important these days, and of course, meal locations, low-cost childcare, and they'll offer groceries from the pantry that Lazarus maintains, and Betty is excellent at making sure that they know they have access to that. After the interview with the client is completed, the volunteer meets with the director privately. We meet back there to determine the amount of assistance that Lazarus is able to provide. The amount of assistance is shared with the client, and a check is either delivered in person to a rental office, or it's mailed that day to a rental office or to the appropriate utility. I'd like to add, and Jack had touched on it, it's a challenge for a lot of these clients to obtain their ledgers and other documents. Sometimes language barriers, sometimes the rental offices aren't as receptive as we'd like to provide full ledgers, which is what we need. We want to see a history of how these folks have been doing. But once they manage this, and sometimes there's some back and forth, I call that relationship building, it's a pleasure to confirm their appointments. I get really excited when everything's in and I can confirm those. An opportunity, I just like to emphasize this, an opportunity to meet and speak with a client face-to-face on Tuesday mornings is really an important part of Lazarus, and that's always been the point, is relationship. But also, if they come in person, they can get helped in a shorter amount of time, as I've just touched on, because the checks are issued quickly that afternoon. June goes up to the office and they are issued. This is especially important for clients who have court dates, a court order for eviction, as June checked, or have received a notice that a utility is about to be disconnected. We've had clients recently whose utilities have already been disconnected. So it's wonderful, it's intense on Tuesday morning, but we will have 4 or 6 volunteers, and they're ready to meet with clients. Many of them have volunteered with Lazarus, as you know, for 13 years or more, some from the very beginning. And their support and affection, actually, I would say, with one another, with this group, is clear. So we are strong, but we're a mighty group, and it's well-equipped to extend the same support to the clients that come in our door. And it's a privilege to work with them. I've enjoyed these last 2 years and look forward to many more.
Wow, am I lucky or what? Is Lazarus lucky? Are our clients fortunate? It's just amazing that, the Holy Spirit's with us a lot. Certainly the last couple of weeks. The stories these last 2 weeks have been, as I mentioned, the one eviction story. And I have to say, too, that I know Jane mentioned that a lot of the handouts and the resources we provide are so, they can be life-changing for people. And I'm going to do a little sidebar. Last year, we had a client who came in, a really lovely woman. She had I think preschool-age child with her and a new baby. She was a professional woman. She had just separated from her spouse and was facing a lonely road to hold life together for herself and her children. She was wanted to go back to work and had great potential in terms of finding employment. But childcare was just this mountain to climb. So I, having worked many years with, and actually for a period of time for the Campagna Center, I knew that they had resources that she'd use. So I gave her the contact information. She was able to get the older child into the after-school program and the younger child in early Head Start, and in the same school, the public school in Alexandria. So this is part of our partnership, but it's also the importance of having available so many resources. And Alexandria has so many wonderful resources, not only with the city, but also with so many nonprofits and churches. So we're very, very grateful for that. I'm going to ask Dennis Brack to relate a story that came up a week ago, Tuesday before last, that was one of the most intense challenges we've had, I think, with Lazarus. And Dennis has been around for a long time, so he has lots of stories. But this one particularly, sorry, Dennis, so have I.
We all have.
So,
I got to tell one thing.
the microphone is yours, sir.
Well, one thing that Jack feels the first thing, and then it's divided between Melody, Keish, and June takes some, and then I take some, and we call those numbers. And every one of them, you finally get the person, and then they start out with all these things of why these excuses and just they pour their life out right in front of you, and you don't want to stop them because all you need to do is get their name and things. So you kind of listen to them, and then in our questionnaire, then we have a question of why is your rent not being paid and things like that. But still, it all starts out with this confession that we get, and it probably helps them as much as anything. So anyway, I'll tell you about this one that came in. It was 2 weeks ago, I guess. So we usually have, and I think it's Elizabeth Darton comes in who can speak Spanish, but she wasn't there, and that happens occasionally. So what June has found is we can call somebody to speak, and Ann Heising, Haynes, is that it? Heising, yeah, and then so you take your phone, and they're ready to take the call, and so then you set that down, and that kind of works, but this time didn't have to do that because the client brought her son. The client could not speak any English, but she did have a son that was perfect. And so I'm going along with my little list, which, Jack, it's an unforgiving list. If you don't do it right, you don't go on. So anyway, I'm going along, and all of a sudden, here comes June tapping me on the shoulder. God, I'm doing something wrong. But anyway, and then June, I guess, had been reading the documents, and you saw that there was a court date, sheriff's date, and I'll give that back to you.
For that morning. Yeah, so there's a sheriff's notice for that morning. The sheriff was going to be arriving, and I thought, surely there's got to be a mistake. Why would this family be here if the sheriff could be in the process of putting their things on the sidewalk? So I called the sheriff's office and said, can you please, we're trying to assist this family, and bottom line, we just want to confirm that this eviction is taking place. So it took a few minutes. I could hear some paper scrambling in the background, and I thought, oh, well, maybe it's been canceled, which was my hope, and which would have made sense because the family was here. So there's a lot more to the story, and time is limited, so I won't go into all the detail, but I came out and told Dennis, and poor Dennis is sitting there like a deer in the headlights, like, what is going on? And so I called, but as I mentioned, I called the sheriff's office. They confirmed that the eviction was indeed happening. And I said, well, it says here on the order at 10 o'clock. And they said, well, it could happen anytime after 10. So I came out, and then I realized the young man spoke English. And I have to say to you that this young man, who's probably 17, 18 years old, was remarkable. He was calm, he was poised, he was so mature beyond his years. And he was conversing back and forth with his mother, and he said, the leasing office told us if we can come up with some of the money, they will cancel the eviction. So I'm thinking, okay, that's our in. So I quickly wrote out a promissory note. I said, can you get them on the phone right now? And he said, well, they don't open till 10:30. So I said, okay, I want you to go to the leasing office, take this promissory note, and call me, and I will speak to them. In the meantime, I'm going to contact our funding partners to see if they can, if they'll be able to pitch in as well. So I went back into the back room, I sent the email out, feeling a little like I was in another world because this was so urgent. Sent the message. So at 10:28, I get an email from St. Vincent de Paul saying, we'll put in $500. We had already offered $500. That paid for half of what they owed. So Daniel the son was in the office. I called him. The sheriff was standing there. And the leasing manager got on the phone. I explained to her, and I said, I've gotten some additional funds, so we're up to $1,000. She couldn't have been more delightful and wonderful, and she was so happy. She said, thank you so much. We're canceling the eviction. Now, that is the story of collaboration and volunteers, and it all came together for a happy ending. So. Anyway, we have to move on. We don't have a lot of time. So I just wanted to let you see visually the funding that keeps Lazarus going. But that is, there's never enough money. There's just never enough. There's so much need out there. And I want to talk for a moment about collaboration and how it works. These funding partners, we have a weekly call. I'm going to run through this very quickly. We have a weekly call that, and you can see up here, the net is wide, but the core group consists of St. Paul, St. Vincent de Paul, Christ Church, 2 city agencies, and another nonprofit. Now, we have this weekly call. There are usually 4 or 5 of us on the call, and what we do is we run through a list of clients that we're working with, particularly the ones that have court orders or have utility cutoffs, and we try to pull together our resources. The city is very helpful if there's a high balance, because they're the only ones that can really provide up to 3 months of rent. We explore opportunities to create better processes and relationships in the community. We support each other as peers. We advocate for our clients with one voice. We've had a couple of calls with ARHA recently, or actually over the last 2 years, because there are always glitches. There are always things going on with clients who are in ARHA properties. But we have one amazing person and 2 or 3 caseworkers that are just phenomenal. So when you hear negative things, and I know there have been things in the press about ARHA, please know that there are people there who are advocating, who are working really hard, and we are there partnering with them as well. We also are able to avoid duplicate payments. When we first started this call, we realized that, we gave Mr. Smith $400 for his utility bill, last month. Oh, well, so did we. So that's been wonderful, because we really it helps us to use our funds in the best way. So what do we have next? I guess we're looking at, we're looking at the client and housing forecast is, There are two things I want to mention. One is that we have seen a huge increase in our Hispanic clients, and we all certainly can understand the reasons for that. A lot of them are afraid to go to work. A lot of them are gig workers. We also have had in the last year an uptick in Afghan families. A lot of the resources that were available to them are no longer available. So we do have 2 or 3 wonderful Afghan organizations in the community which we will refer them to. But we do see many of those families, and also sometimes there's a language barrier, but we also have found a couple of translators which help us. I'm going to ask Stacy to talk about our future and answering new calls.
Oh, sorry. It's all right. So one of the things that I've been working on here at St. Paul's, and we did a forum about this in February, was a long vision of Oran's that I have shared, which is a way to help people that are in the gap, that they're not really eligible necessarily for assistance, but they have jobs, but they can't get a bank loan, or they can only get a loan at like 20-30% interest, or the old payday loans, which is where you pledge your next paycheck and you get in this horrible cycle of 100% debt. So we've been working to try to find a partner to actually do the lending, and we found that last December. We launched the program, Rescue Loan, with lots of great friends and a working group every week that would talk about how we were doing, and we launched it, and then the new administration came in and threw everything up in the air, and so we sort of had a delay in time. But anyway, we got back on track, and our partner in this is a group called New American Lending, which is an arm of Global Rescue, which is the nation's largest immigration resettlement agency. It's part of the Lutheran Church, or once was a direct Lutheran philanthropy. Anyway, so we have done our experiment, if you will, and we've done well. We did 5, maybe 6 loans to individuals, $5,000 each. We saved, in a circumstance somewhat like what June had, a woman and her mother from being evicted. And then her sister was all about to get evicted, and so her sister moved in with them. So we've done some really good work with the Rescue Loan Program. We've talked to maybe 50 people, because once the word got out in the community, we'd get calls, and I didn't have Jack to help me, so I would take the calls and listen to the stories, and always want to say, I'll give you whatever I can, because you just hear the stories and you want to help. But after this experience, what we have found is that the people that come to St. Paul's looking for assistance, a loan is not the right answer for them 95% of the time, because what we get now mostly are people on the verge of losing their home through rental eviction. And you get to the point of being evicted because you haven't paid your rent for 5-6 months. And so chances are, if you have a job, every dime you have is being spent, and so you don't have the resources. Even at a 8% loan, you don't have another $120 a month to pay a loan back. And so after what I would call the Good College Try, with funding from a donor specific for this program, we've decided that it's not the right answer. So we are still getting calls, and I'm still referring them to New American Lending, and they are still talking to people. So it's not stopped. It's just that St. Paul's is not going to send resources there. So we're thinking about other possible things that we can do, because there's always more need in the community. And one of the things that June and the volunteers have found is that people come in because their car is broken down. And if they're doing, if they're driving or Instacart or Uber, they don't have a car, they don't have income. And so they make the choice. They don't pay their rent because they fix their car. And then so we're trying to work on a proposal to add car repair as one of the things that Lazarus would fund. We found a possible great local garage and family as a partner, because certainly I don't know how to fix a car. I don't know if someone comes in and says, I want this or that. And Catholic Charities has a program similar to this, and so we are learning from them the pitfalls and also the strengths of it. So we're working on that, and who knows what else might come up as people come in. That's a wonderful thing, is we find that there's a need. then maybe we can come up with a simple program to help that need and respond to help the community for that. So that's sort of the answering the call for the next 25 years, we hope, to continue to be flexible and to listen and expand as we need to.
I just will quickly just draw your attention to a new, we had, on one of our calls about 3 weeks ago, we had a representative from the city who worked on the Housing 2040 report and the master plan. And she gave us about an hour-long PowerPoint presentation, and it's, you know, if you want to get a handle on what's happening in the city or what needs are out there, it's very informative. And it's something that's ongoing with the city. So I'm just drawing your attention to it. We had a wonderful presentation, and it certainly was helpful for those of us who are trying to help people with housing. We don't want to just write checks. We want to be advocates, you know, because this is a real, not just for the city of Alexandria, it's all over the country. We have a huge housing crisis, affordable housing. Thank you. I'm sorry we didn't leave a lot of time for questions, but I just also want to invite you to join us on October 17th. It's a good party, and it's for a good cause. So thank you so much for everything you do to support Lazarus. I want to ask our volunteers to stand up, please. Stand up. Volunteers, hello. We actually have 21 volunteers, so we're very blessed.
I got to say one thing. Betty has been here forever, and she gives out the food. We do give food when people come, and Betty is in charge of that.
Very grateful.
Try to remind the council